Hi, today Ask F5 shows you how to configure Lightweight Directory Access Protocol Secure, or LDAPS, to offload SSL processing to a big IP system. You configure a Client SSL profile when you want the big IP system to terminate client-side SSL traffic so that it can decrypt client-side ingress traffic and encrypts client-side egress traffic. By terminating the client-side SSL traffic, the big IP system offloads these decryption and encryption functions from the destination LDAPS servers. Before performing the procedure in this demo, make sure that you have access to the Big IP configuration utility and that you import a valid certificate and key onto the Big IP system. For more information about SSL certificates, refer to this article linked below. To configure your system, you perform the following steps. Configure a Client SSL profile, optionally configure a Server SSL profile, configure a persistence profile, configure an LDAPS health monitor, configure an LDAPS server pool, and configure the LDAPS virtual server that will use the SSL profiles, persistence profile, and LDAP pool that you configured. First, create the Client SSL profile that terminates the client-side LDAPS connections on the Big IP system. To do so, log into the configuration utility. Go to Local Traffic, Profiles, SSL, Client. Select Create. Enter the name for your Client SSL profile. For certificate keychain, select the custom checkbox if it is not already selected, and then select the associated certificate and key that you imported earlier for this LDAPS service. Select Add to add the certificate key chain to the profile. Configure any remaining settings as needed for your environment. When you're done, select Finished. You will later assign this Client SSL profile to the LDAPS virtual server. Next, if you want the Big IP system to perform re-encryption for the server-side LDAPS traffic, you will configure a Server SSL profile. To do so, log into the configuration utility if needed, go to Local Traffic, Profiles, SSL, Server. Select Create. For name, enter a name for your Server SSL profile. At this point, you can configure server-side settings as needed and then select Finished. If you want to configure server authentication, refer to this article linked below. Now create a persistence profile for the LDAPS traffic. To do so, log into the configuration utility if needed, go to Local Traffic, Profiles, Persistence, and select Create. Enter a name for the new persistence profile. For persistence type, select the appropriate type from the list. For example, you can create a persistence profile using the source address affinity parent. Configure any remaining settings as needed and then select Finished. Next, create an LDAPS health monitor to verify the health of the back-end LDAPS servers. To do so, log into the configuration utility if needed, go to Local Traffic, Monitors. Select Create. Enter a name for the monitor. For type, select LDAP. For security, if you are configuring the Big IP system to re-encrypt traffic to the LDAP service, select either TLS or SSL as appropriate for your configuration. Note that there is currently no option within the LDAP monitor to specify an SSL profile or to define client or server certificate authentication. Configure any remaining settings that apply to the LDAP service you want to monitor and then select Finished. Now create the LDAP server pool that will receive traffic from the LDAPS virtual server. To do so, log into the configuration utility if needed, go to Local Traffic, Pools, Pool List, and select Create. Enter a name for the pool. For health monitors, in the available list, select the LDAPS monitor you created in the previous procedure and move it to the active list. For node name, enter a name for the new node. For address, enter the address for the new LDAP node. For service port, enter 389 for LDAP LDAP or 636 if you are configuring the virtual server to re-encrypt the LDAP traffic to LDAPs on the servers. Select Add to add the node to the pool. Repeat these steps for any additional nodes. Then configure any remaining settings as needed for your environment and then select Finished. Finally, create the LDAPS virtual server that will use the SSL profiles, persistence profile, and LDAP pool that you configured. To do so, log into the configuration utility if needed, go to Local Traffic, Virtual Servers, Virtual Server List, and select Create. Enter a name for the virtual server. For source address, enter the IP address or network from which clients connect. For destination address mask, enter the virtual server IP address that clients will use for LDAPS. For service port, enter the port number 636 for the LDAPS server. For SSL profile client, in the available list, select the client SSL profile you created earlier and move it to the selected list. If you're configuring the big IP system to re-encrypt traffic to the LDAPS servers, for SSL profile server, in the available list, select the SSL profile you created earlier and move it to the selected list. Under Resources, for default pool, select the LDAPS server pool you created earlier. For default persistence profile, select the persistence profile you created earlier. Configure any remaining settings as needed for your environment and then select Finished. That's it. If you have questions or comments, please send us an email. Thanks for watching.